The night sky over the Arizona desert stretched endlessly, a wide blanket of silver blue, lit by a heavy moon. Most of the Apache camp slept in peace, their fires dimming to quiet embers. But trouble didn't always announce itself with noise. It often came, wrapped in silence. That's how the rustlers arrived. They moved like shadows scraping across the sand, confident in their own boldness, certain no one in the camp would expect an attack at such a late hour. They were wrong, but before anyone could react, they made their move and escaped into the darkness with Kaya. Kaya, the daughter of the tribe's war leader, was known for her insight and courage. Even as the rustlers pushed her onto a horse and tied her wrists, she didn't panic. She kept her eyes open, memorizing the landscape, the stars, the way the men spoke to each other. She understood that fear clouded judgment, and she wasn't willing to give her captors any advantage. She also knew deep in her chest that her people would come for her. She was not just valued, she was loved. When the tribe realized she was gone, their grief and anger rose like smoke. Her brother Nakai demanded to ride immediately, pacing like a storm waiting to break. Warriors gathered, preparing to track the captors before dawn. But before anyone could mount up, a lone figure approached through the dim light of the dying fire. His tall hat cast a long shadow, and his steps were steady, deliberate, familiar to all who lived in the region. It was Dawson Reed, a quiet gunslinger whose reputation stretched far beyond their lands. He had once been feared across territories, but over the years he'd found peace living near the Apache people, earning their trust through respect and honesty. He rarely spoke unless he had something worth saying. Tonight, he didn't waste time on questions. He already understood the situation the moment he saw the camp stirred. He walked to the boundary fence, tightened his saddle straps, and looked toward the pale line of the desert on the horizon. Dawn wasn't far, and every second mattered. As the first hint of sunlight crept across the sands, Dawson swung into his saddle. "They stole the wrong woman," he said, voice low but certain. And without waiting for anyone to follow, he rode out, already tracking the faint marks left by the kidnappers, determined to bring Kaya home before the sun climbed too high. Dawson followed the trail with the calm focus of someone who had spent half his life reading the desert like a book. Even the faintest clues were enough for him. A broken stem here, a pressed patch of dirt there, the way the sand shifted under hooves that were moving too fast. The rustlers weren't skilled at hiding their tracks, and Dawson didn't mind. Every mistake they made was a step that brought him closer to Kaya. He noticed something else too, small, subtle signs that didn't match the clumsy trail left by the riders. A thin line of disturbed dust, a stone turned deliberately, a prickly pear spine laid in an unusual direction. Dawson recognized these for what they were, Kaya's quiet signals. She wasn't sitting helplessly. She was leaving a path for those who knew how to read it. Kaya, in the rustlers' makeshift camp, remained alert despite the long night. She listened to the men argue about payment, about territory, about how much trouble they might be in. They clearly didn't understand the gravity of what they had done, nor did they know anything about the people whose land they trespassed on. Kaya kept her expression calm, her breathing steady. Panic would only give them satisfaction. Instead, she saved her energy, watched for openings, and relied on the skills she had been taught since childhood. She believed someone would find her, Nakai, the warriors, or perhaps the quiet gunslinger who always treated her people with respect. Dawson reached a ridge just as the sun slid lower, painting the desert in soft gold. From his vantage point, he could see the rustlers' camp nestled between two scraggly hills, smoke drifting from a small fire. He crouched low, studying movement, counting bodies, watching the patterns of the guards. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't need to yet. His goal wasn't to start a fight, but to get Kaya out safely and without chaos. When darkness returned, he moved like a whisper, stepping between shadows, using the uneven ground to hide his approach. The camp wasn't well guarded, and their overconfidence played in his favor. When he reached the tent she was held in, he pushed aside the flap with careful hands. Kaya turned immediately, her eyes steady rather than startled. She had expected someone, and she wasn't surprised it was him. "I knew you'd come," she said, "I couldn't let you stay out here longer than necessary," Dawson replied softly. Together, they slipped back into the night, moving quickly, knowing that once the rustlers discovered her missing, the desert would erupt with noise. Dawson and Kaya moved swiftly through the narrow washes that cut across the desert floor, their footsteps light and deliberate. The night around them felt wide and listening, every sound sharper in the cool darkness. Dawson kept checking behind them, knowing the rustlers would notice her escape at any moment. Kaya stayed close, keeping her breathing steady, already studying the terrain for places they could use if they needed to hide or defend themselves. She had been raised to respect the desert, and the desert, silent, ancient. Watching seemed to guide their way. They made it almost a mile before a shout cracked through the stillness like a whip. Torches flared in the camp behind them, and soon the pounding of boots and hooves echoed across the sand. The rustlers had found her missing, and the desert was no longer quiet. Dawson and Kaya reached a narrow canyon, just as the first torchlight began flickering behind distant rocks. The walls of the canyon rose sharply on both sides, giving them a defensible space but also trapping them if the rustlers closed in from both ends. Kaya picked up a sturdy fallen limb, gripping it firmly. Dawson noticed but didn't argue. He understood her strength and respected it. Instead of pulling her behind him, he gave her a short nod, an unspoken agreement that they would stand together. The rustlers approached, their voices growing louder, filled with impatience and anger. Dawson called out a warning for them to turn back, making it clear he didn't want anyone hurt. But arrogance pushed the men forward. They believed numbers alone would give them the advantage. Before the situation could erupt, the sound of distant hooves rolled through the canyon like thunder. The rustlers froze for a moment, confusion flickering across their faces. Then from the east, riders appeared, fast and fierce, their silhouettes cutting through the early morning light. Nakai led them, his expression sharp with determination. The Apache riders surrounded the rustlers with swift precision, cutting off every escape route. Realizing they were hopelessly outmatched, the men dropped their weapons and backed away, fear finally overtaking their bravado. Kaya stepped forward, her gaze steady and unshaken. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone made it clear that the rustlers' plan had failed from the moment they took her. Dawson watched quietly as Nakai rode to his sister's side, relief softening his stern expression. When the danger had passed, the morning sun spilled into the canyon, warm and golden. Dawson prepared to ride home, and Nakai clasped his arm in gratitude. The message left behind in the desert was unmistakable. They had stolen the wrong Apache woman, and the strength standing behind her was far greater than anything those rustlers had imagined.